Tomorrow is the last Monday in May, which has become the day that we honor what was on the monument, the 31st of May. We call it Memorial Day. It was originally called Decorations Day, not even Remembrance Day. And my daughter and son-in-law and their two children are out putting wreaths on the tombstones in the local military cemetery. Everywhere they live, they do this. And often they'll do it at Christmas. But this is part of their family tradition, their act of service to honor those who have fallen in that. And it started actually 160 years ago. And because on November 19, 1863, a man that we all call the Great Emancipator, but many of us do, got up and declared that 77 years ago, our forefathers brought forth on this continent nations conceived in liberty and dedicated to the proposition that all beings are created equal. And now we are engaged in a great civil war, testing whether that nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated can long endure. I think we may be doing some of the same. Hopefully it won't be any greater. Well, about 5 years later, those two armies that had been killing each other by the thousands every week, over 50,000 people in each army, same way through this process, were combined in the Grand Republican Army. And General O'Connor declared that we needed to stop thinking about how wonderful our lives are now and remember the reason that they could be. And so he declared the last Monday of 1868, May of 1860, to be Decoration Day, when we would decorate. And that was the term used to put a medal on a soldier. We would decorate. So we would decorate the graves, the tombs of all those who had been found. Now, part of the reason he did that was because while the rest of the country was enjoying this great prosperity, post-war prosperity, putting their lives together in the new industrial revolution and all of that, the military was going out and cleaning up the places where prisoners were, and finding huge heaps of bodies in countries. And they've been doing that for several years. And he thought maybe the rest of the world needed to be reminded of how awful it had been when we forgot who we are. When we forgot that we came together as different as we are to make something wonderful happen for every. Yes? Yes. So General O'Connor declared that day, and it was several years before it became recognized as a federal event every year. And if you ever watched a ceremony, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier, who represents so many thousands, given their lives in that, no idea. It's a very profound ceremony. Or if you've ever wandered around Arlington or any of those large military cemeteries in the country, it's pretty stirring. My family has been in every war that this country has had since the country. And you have to do that. Yeah. Not because we're warmongers, because we aren't, as you know from knowing me. We are convinced of two things. One, that what this country stands for is really important. whether we're executing it properly or not. And the other, that when there is an opportunity to serve, we serve. And if it happens to be showing up in the military, take a deep breath and go in and do it. And I've been fortunate enough to hang out with 5 generations of active duty military, people who have served in one war, including my daughter who was in Afghanistan. Fortunately, in the medical, not carrying a rifle, but she did have to know how to shoot and pace. Yes, and her daughter is an Air Force junior ROTC, ROTC, because I think it's a kind of a difference. She's a teenager, right? Her dad was a master sergeant. She wants to outrank. So we're honoring a Memorial Day, the ones who have fallen. Veterans Day, I get to honor everybody else because every one of my family came back. Every single generation since the French came back. And I don't think that was all luck. I think that was because this fundamental principle that we have in unity has been a fundamental principle of my family from the beginning. And that is the eternal, constant, continual, supportive, protective environment that is God. We know that God is here now and always. And even though the situation looks dire indeed, we know that we are guided and protected in our service to whatever it is. And I know that that is so because the family, the 2 men that were in the Civil War, one came out of the Civil War and established a graduate school for men who needed to learn how to start a business and weren't allowed to because they were military, and they didn't get to do that process. And the other one joined with Andrew Taylor in creating the Osteopathic College of Medicine. The Taylors are part of the family, the president. So yeah, we know that it was about service. And the son of the one who created the business school went on to become a geology professor in a Methodist ministry in the 1870s. Try that. Teaching geology during the week and going from Methodist church to Methodist church over the weekend. He did 5 at a time as a circuit riding Methodist preacher. A circuit riding preacher. Okay, I guess I inherited that too. So when people come into any position from that place of knowing that God's presence is here and that we are in service, all kinds of things become possible that couldn't possibly happen. And when we look back on our lives, there were many, many, many times when it didn't seem like God could possibly have been present, right? But I've talked to guys who spent days in foxholes, and they came out. And they realized they had everything they needed every moment, even then. And that's an important part of the function of remembering. We get to the habit of telling ourselves these horrible stories about our life. And we start being afraid we aren't going to have enough, and that we aren't going to be supported and supplied and cared for and protected and nurtured. I'm here today saying I must have been supported and supplied and protected and nurtured every minute to get me here today. Yes. very important function of memory is to get us out of the stories that the culture encourages, especially after that I don't have enough enough. If you don't say, I cancel that, not happening, erasing this. I won't say those words, right? Because I know the truth. We always have, as Dan Neyman says, more than enough in a universe that love created and on a planet of sacred. And when we look forward, it's easy to think maybe that's not so, but look back, we know it is so. Now, by the time I was in my teen years paying attention to the fact that people were decorating graves, my family didn't do that. Everyone was decorating everywhere. They weren't just decorating the soldiers, the past. And that's why my family moved to that. They thought Memorial Day was about the soldiers, all the generations. And it's my daughter's generation that is making that tradition. Well, kind of makes sense. She was at we kind of do these things. But to realize the people who have gone before us have, some of them, willingly put their lives on the line, whatever that line was, so that we might know that we are constantly. The many, many, many men who ended up fighting and giving their lives in what we call the Civil War, the war between the states, a few, very few northern troops called it the war against slavery. Gave up those lives because they felt it was the only way that this nation or any nation so conceived and so dedicated. On the gray side, the Confederate side, it was the war against the tyranny of the Yankees. But really it was, how can we possibly imagine a life that works for our children if we can't live the way we've always lived? They were fighting for the well-being of future generations. While the Industrial Revolution took over the world, and while the idea of a large plantation with many, many, many bodies needed to make it was fading into the past. They couldn't see it. They couldn't see the possibility of the future. They went into fear. Now, this was not a new argument. If you have seen the movie 1776 or the play, it's really very good to watch because it's taken out of the letters and the documents from the time. And it's made musical and it's fun and there's only two things that are absolutely not accurate. But what is accurate is the arguments that went on day after day after day over whether it was okay to keep slaves. Because again, the people who'd grown up that way could not imagine a life in which these people who were part of their property could possibly not be part of it. They didn't think of them as people. They thought of them as worker bees, as less than human. And yet, it was fundamental to their family's well-being that that structure remained. So as early as 1775, when the first Continental group, it wasn't officially a Congress yet, the conventions were gathering, this argument was going on. And there's some beautiful scenes in 1776 where the gentleman from North Carolina is furious at the lawyer from Boston, John Adams, and they're in each other's face. Landlord, lawyer. Because their fundamental understanding of how things work was so different, but their hearts were, yes, we need to make the world a better place. We don't see anything like that happening today, do we? 250 years after those groups are meeting, we're still having the same fundamental disagreement. Not about the what, but about the how. And this wonderful song that Darcy sings, memories. We remember the good times. We want more of them. But would we really do it? If I'm living from memories that are based on my fears, I'm going to choose a path that is not necessarily inclusive, welcoming. I'm going to choose a path that is controlling and authoritarian, because fear does that. If I can shift, as the end of that song says, choosing my memories and focusing on the love and the laughter and the ways we have been protected and nurtured and supplied and supported every single step of the way, every single breath of every day. And I can go forward without having to be afraid that what I think should be isn't. Because I know that what I think should be probably isn't. That something more amazing is possible. And is going to happen. Is actually already happening. If I can allow myself to let go of the fear. So a huge part of what I teach and what I offer in the writings and on my TV and radio show is to encourage people to choose the memories. In my own life, I'm the only daughter of a single mom who served in the Navy during World War II, as did her brother. And for whom fear and control were very important, especially around this thing that she didn't quite know what to do with. It was about knee high. And it kept growing. and did things that she didn't know what to do on. She had a hard time as a mom. And took some of that out on the kid that she was raising. And so when I was going into my late teens, 20s, and early 30s, I didn't remember very many of the times. But I knew what I was supposed to do, and I did everything I was supposed to do the best way I knew how to do it until about a week. And many of you have heard about that. But the piece you may not have heard about is the very, very, very first step in my healing process was to choose to remember the times my mother and I had been loving and loving. That was the beginning. Choose to focus on those times, not on the stuff that I had been doing. And the healing began. And the guidance put me in touch with you, and science of mind, and of course in miracles, and Reiki, and a number of other things that took me each one to the next step. But the first step was remembering the love and the laughter. So when my daughter and her husband and her two kids go to these cemeteries, I have a photograph of my 3-year-old grandson in a 3-year-old sized flight jump. They are remembering with and for those people, not the awful experience that led to that body being, but to the act, the decision, and the experience of being in total service to something bigger. Happened to be a nation so conceived and so dead that we call the United States.